Good afternoon. Welcome to the Tuesday Talks at the Atwood. I'm your host and Executive Director, Kevin Wright. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. Before we introduce this evening's speaker, as usual, a few housekeeping items. The museum is now open Fridays and Saturdays, 10 to 4 throughout the month of May. Reservations are required, so please go to our website to make reservations. We will do our best to accommodate walk-ins depending on the space availability when you arrive. Starting June 1st, the museum will be open Tuesdays through Saturdays, again, 10 to 4. So we look forward to seeing you this summer. Our next lecture will be held on Tuesday, June 15th at 5 p.m. Liberty's Martyr, the story of Dr. Joseph Warren, with our guest speaker, Janet Ular. So please make your reservations for that lecture. Should be a really good one. If you are enjoying our Tuesday talks, please consider donating. Your kind generosity helps keep this program going. Ellie is going to add a link to our chat for your convenience. During the talk, if you have any questions for our speaker, please write them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Captain Mike likes to interact with audience during his talks, so don't be shy. We also will leave time for additional questions immediately following this evening's talk, time permitted. So that's enough of me chattering right now. Let me introduce our speaker. Captain Mike Abdow of Magic Charters has been fishing for over 50 years. Starting in Provincetown as a young child, working in Orleans for 10 years, and finally fishing out of Chatham for the last 20 years. He helped to start the Cape Cod Commercial Hook Fishermen's Association in 1990, which was the precursor to the Fishermen's Alliance. So we're very excited to have him. I'm sure he has a lot of great stories. So without further ado, Captain Mike Abdow.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, very much. My name is Michael Abdow, and I was born in Massachusetts in Worcester in 1954. My family comes from Lebanon in the Mediterranean, from a little town called Mahaiti. And our last name was Abdow when we came to this country, but to Americanize, when he came through Ellis Island in 1895, they added a W. So it's Abdow, because they wanted to be more American. My family always fished and hunted because food substance was the big thing. Family was always together. My great-grandfather, my father, my grandfather. The picture you're looking at here is 1955. That's me in the middle. I'm 1 year old. My dad is to the left. My grandfather is to the right. My great-grandfather I'm sitting on his lap. If you notice the curtains behind, you'll see that there's fish on them. This is in 1955. So my grandfather did a lot of hunting and fishing. My dad ran a scrap iron business, Abdow Scrap Iron in Worcester. When my grandfather would go fishing in the old days, well, we call the old days, they used to fish commercially for striped bass and bluefish, pollock, cod, all the stuff. I remember when I was a little kid, my grandfather would walk down to the water with a 2x4 in Provincetown on the race, out on a place called the Race. And he would hit the water with the 2x4 to spook away the small, what we call turd pollock, little tiny 12, 14-inch pollock. Because if you casted through that, you'd catch a pollock every cast, and they weren't worth anything. So they were trying to catch striped bass. Striped bass they would only take small ones, which were 16 inches. You could catch all you wanted. There was no season and no days like there is now. And what would happen is that you would catch the small striped bass and you would bring them into the market. The market was at the end of the McMullen's Wharf, which was the old wooden wharf that had the railroad ties. The end of the bill was a building on the left, and it was run and owned by George Cawley. He used to buy our fish. In the old days, with the picture you're looking at here now, is if you notice the vehicles and stuff, There were no beach buggies on the sand yet. And the gentleman on the right, the old guy playing with his ear, is a guy named Pop Williams. And then the youngster standing there is Dick Sams, who just passed away about 5 or 10 years ago. Next to him, sitting down, is Arnold Lane. At the time, the best striped bass fisherman on the East Coast, or again, what we hear. Next to him is my grandfather. And next to him is Bob Williams. And it looks like they've been up all night, and all they caught was that one little pipsqueak bass. So they worked hard in them days. And they worked, all night long. Most of it was nighttime fishing. Then my grandfather decided to start up a club, the MBBA, Massachusetts Beach Buggy Association, which you see on the campers you see now in the four-wheel drives, the state of Massachusetts and a number in the middle. Well, my grandfather's number was 15, which all have been retired, all the low numbers. My grandfather's best friend was Frank Woolner, a big writer, wrote lots of books about hunting and fishing, excuse me, was the head of Saltwater Fisherman magazine for years. He was the head writer or editor or whatever he was. I was a youngster. And when they had a drawing, there was 25 guys that had a drawing. Frank pulled out number 15. My grandfather pulled out number 13. And Frank wanted number 13. So my grandfather just handed him the little ticket, and that's how he got the number 15. And again, excuse me, this was told to me by my grandfather. And then I have been friends with Frank Woolner's daughter, and she told me the same story. So it's pretty much true. So they started the Beach Buggy Association. They had old milk trucks. As you see here, there's an old Wood Willie's Jeep. And then I don't know what the car is behind, but it looks like some big old thing. We have other pictures we'll show you in a couple of minutes. I don't know what it is. It could be a DeSoto. I'm not sure. But that's what they had. And the older guy on the right, he's sitting on the bumper. He's sitting on the fender, step up on the side. So they had these running boards. And these are what they were using to go out on the sand. The Jeep was the only one that had, of course, four-wheel drive. My grandfather's beach buggy was an old converted milk or bread truck. They used bread trucks and old, milk trucks. They put little camps in them, they put little beds in there, little refrigerators and little toilets and, bunks enough to sleep 2 or 3 people, and had one-wheel drive, just one wheel. And used to wear these big airplane tires that were used, and they would lower the air down to 8 or 9 pounds of pressure. Now, of course, the new vehicles now, 15 would be considered low. For us, 15 would be considered high. So 10 pounds of pressure, and like an old camel, they would go up the dune and then down the dune. And I would follow in the old Jeep. I'm not sure what that is. Could be a Woody wagon. I'm not sure. We had a Jeep. I think it was like a 1956 station wagon, but that wasn't it because it had no wood grain on the side. It could only go 40 miles an hour as fast as it would go. And they would go through the dunes and park the beach buggies out on the race. Back in the old days, you could drive from Long Point, which is the very end of land. If you look at Provincetown, it's hooked, would be right at the very end. And you could drive all the way around to Nauset Inlet. Of course, all that got shut down as time went along. So when I was fishing in Provincetown, I learned from all the Portuguese, or as we said, short, Portuguese. Lots of them. Here's the picture of Arnold Lane with bass. You can see the old buggy there on the sand. Again, probably two-wheel drive maybe, but mostly one. And these are the guys I learned how to fish from. And there was a gentleman named Bob Pond who made Adam plugs. He's been gone a long time now. And he, as you can see at the top of one of the rods, there was a model P40. But because the rods were the old Honel blanks, first fiberglass blanks ever made, and there was no such thing as a spinning rod. Everything was a conventional reel that you had to do everything by hand. That's how I learned how to fish. I didn't learn on a spinning rod. We didn't have them. And I couldn't cast the P40, that big plug. So Bob Pond gave me a pencil. He gave me a small penknife and a piece of wood and said, make me a small one. So I made him a small one. And my grandfather and dad owned a scrap iron business. And we would bring down little stainless steel chips. And he would make a little cut and he would put those chips in and bend them and then put a little pin through it and then put a piece of old coat hanger and so you could put the hooks on it and stuff. And he named it, he was going to name it MA 54 Junior after me. But my grandfather told him, no, don't be foolish. Of course, I wasn't just a little kid then. And it weighed 3.5 ounces. So I could cast it because I couldn't cast a big one. So they came up with the P54 Junior, which I still have the original signed by Bob, put away, of course. Value, probably nothing, more sentimental. So these guys taught me how to fish. And when I got a little bigger, 10, 12 years old, I went and used to hang out on the dock in Provincetown. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Manny Phillips. Little guy, glasses, quacked. I call it quacking, small, grunty, but an excellent fisherman. And excellent was the word. He bought a big boat called the Silver Mink, and it was a purse seine. Purse seine is we go around the fish with a big net with another small boat towing it off, and the two meet together. The floats keep the net up, and underneath on the bottom is a cable, and you grab the cable and hook it into the block, and it would pull the cable up tight. So the fish was sitting in a bowl of water. Picture a cereal bowl with the rim on the surface and the bottom in the water, closed, nothing can get out. And they would take and they would bring the fish up to the side of the boat. They had a big block that was up in the air, and they would put the net in and it would pull the net in, because they used to do it by hand, but when they got more mechanized, they went to bigger nets. And at the end, we would pull the net to snug it up real tight. And they would either dip in with a net that was attached to a boom and a trawl head, a winch, I'll say. There was another word for it, but we don't say that anymore. And so they would bring the fish up. We would braille them. It's called brailing. But there were times we used to catch giant bluefin tuna, and the tuna were all made. There was no sushi in them days. Nobody even knew about the Japanese, and so they were all ground up, and they made cat food with them. So Purina would come down with a big tractor trailer, 44,000 pounds in the trailer. Boy, I even remember the numbers. And they would either grind them or they take them whole. They paid Manny, not me, nickel a pound. That's all we got paid for bluefin tuna, which now is not much more, came down $5, $6 a pound is what I get for it now, because now tuna fish is everywhere in the world. Every country on salt water raises them, and the Japanese buy a lot of, they want perfection. And when you get a fish in the net and you braille them up tight, they hit each other. They die of suffocation, and they smash into each other, and they bruise. There's lots of bruises on them. So the Japanese didn't really want the seine fish. They would prefer rod and reel, but we didn't have rod and reel yet big enough to deal with that. They had these old knuckle buster reels that you used to put your fingers on a thumb pad and stop it. And if you hit the handle going backwards, it would break your knuckles. So that wasn't exactly a very enjoyable experience. So there wasn't many guys doing it. And why would you do it for a nickel a pound? You used to catch herring, mackerel, sometimes whiting, codfish, stuff in shallow water where the net could reach or even come up on the surface. And we used to get paid. We used to get herring. It was three pounds for a penny. Mackerel was 2 pounds for a penny. And what they did with the small fish is they sold them to the mink farms up in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, they used to raise mink and ermine and sable for furs in the 50s and 60s before it was not a good thing to have. So the reason that was the name of the boat, the silver mink, because the fish was silver and they were feeding them to the minks a lot. So that's how I learned, again, to fish from them. I learned how to mend nets. I learned how to, set up cork lines. A cork line, especially in the old days for swordfish, was a piece of monofilament that you got from the service. They all came from the Army, the Navy, whatever. It was all developed for them. And they would put a big hook on the end with a squid or a bait, drop it in the water, and then it would be on a big piece of pot warp or a big piece of cloth line that was not linen, but it was made to absorb and make it heavy. And 40, 50 fathom up, fathom being 6 feet long. They would have what they call kill corks. They would have a cork center and the rope would come through the center and they'd have stop pins on each side. And they would be about this big. And every 20 or 30 feet, they'd have 2 or 3 or 4 of them. And then they'd have what they call a small wooden keg. And then, of course, off of that, they would have a line and they would have an old fishing rod. And if it pulled it down. And that's how they used to hand catch tuna fish up on Stowwagon Bank or in the bay. And they would use live bait, or they would drag up the bait. The old draggers, little Natalia, all the ones that were up there would drag up all the small cod and haddock. That was about that big at the time. So what happened was the fishery got going bigger and bigger, and the Portuguese kind of got left behind a little bit. And then what happened was the beach buggies started to get a little bit less and less, and there was more people coming. Everybody wanted to use the sand. Everybody wanted to go fishing, and then everything started to take off. Around 1971, I went into the Air Force, and that's me there with in basic military training school. I don't have many pictures left. They've all yellowed to the point where you can't see them anymore. So this is the few left that my mom had and put away. And I was stationed in Southeast Asia in 1972, and that's as much as I'll talk about it. When I got back in 74, I got married to a girl I knew from high school, or more or less knew friends too, through her. And because I didn't know how long I was going to have, because of Agent Orange and Agent Purple and all the other stuff. A lot of guys were getting sick from it and stuff. So I was very fortunate that I didn't. Of course, I got there at the tail end, so it was just a couple of bad things that went on, but I was mostly away from that. And I had started having kids, and there wasn't much work, and so I wanted to go back fishing, and she wouldn't do it. Girl from Worcester, and wanted to be near her mother and the family, which was understandable. And so I ended up going to Connecticut, and I started building submarines for the government. I built all the Tridents. I built 5 of the Fast Attack. If you ever watched the movie The Hunt for Red October, you'll see the Dallas 700. My name is inside that, inscripted on one of the bulkheads. My family came and we watched them, christen it in the water. But I built the 726 to the 732. Those are all ICBM carriers for nuclear warhead missiles, 24 missiles. It's all been declassified now. So, I don't really talk about it, but this is what I did. I used to cut the holes in the top of the submarines with a machine with a torch, because I learned how to use a torch when I was a kid working in the scrap iron business with my father. And so I went there and I worked there in the 70s. But while I was there, I bought a boat and I started fishing again. And I started fishing in Montauk and fishing Long Island and fishing Fisher's Island and Block Island. And here's some pictures of Block Island right here. This one here, this is a long time ago when I was skinny, and I was skinny, I'll just say that. you see about an 8-9 pound fish in one end and a 52-pounder in the other, you notice that all the fish are the same year class. They were all born in 64. And so you had these big year classes. And I caught them up to 62 pounds, and this is on Block Island, where I fished with a gentleman named Charlie Dodge, who fishes out of the Chatham Fish Pier with me, came about 4 or 5 years after I got here. And so we always continued to fish. And even though I was building submarines, you know, that was a 40-hour-a-week job. Then I go do 40 hours fishing. So when I got done with that, I got sick from the coating. The H on the vessels were made of what they call high grade 80 steel, and it had a special powder coating on it that would prevent it from rusting. And I became, excuse me, asthmatic to it. So I had to leave. So I got into commercial fishing again, day, night, year round, in a 22-foot boat, and made some money. Lived in New London, Connecticut, and made some money. Did pretty good. Was selling fish to people who would come down with their Cadillacs and put it in the trunk, which I could never understand, in a plastic bag. But hey, I'm making money, and that's what counts. That's what you do when you go fishing. Catch fish, sell fish, put money in bank, like every other business. And after I got done fishing there, my wife wanted to move back home. And so we moved back to Worcester for a couple of years. And my cousin owned the car business, and I went to General Motors school, which was okay because I was always mechanically inclined and had a SS Nova, you know, with a big engine in it and stuff when you're young. Of course, when you got married, all that went away. And but I was always fishing. And once I got done doing that, I just kind of like said to my wife, I want to move back to the Cape and I want to go fishing. She was a little reluctant, and I can understand. So I came down here on my own and moved to Orleans. And I started off in a 24-foot boat called, excuse the word, Bastard, Bastard, instead of one word. Just because it was, I don't even know why, I just did it. So what I ended up doing was I was in Orleans because it was cheaper to get a place there. And I wanted to learn what I had to learn. I met a gentleman by the name of Tiggy Peluso, who passed away 8, 5, 10 years ago. And time's flying by, so people go quickly and gone. And he taught me a couple of the tricks of the trade. One of the tricks was a bottom sounding lead. He gave me one, and it was kind of like a cylinder. The bottom was hollowed empty, and you would put ivory snowflakes, which you used to wash your clothes with in them days, and you would pound it and you would make it flat, and you would build it up and make it nice and flat. And then you would have a line tied to it, and every 6 feet there was a knot, which would have been a fathom. And you would go out and you would work different areas where you were fishing, and you would hit the bottom 3 times with it. And then you would count the knots as you came up. This was also used by the Vikings. This is where this came from, as to tell how deep the water was. But with the ivory snow, or you could probably use wax if you wanted to melt it, and you could do it in a boat, you would read what it was. If you were on a mussel ground, you'd have cuts from the mussel, from the lips of the mussel shells. If you were on the mud, it would come up with mud. If you were on a pebbly bottom, you'd have small pebbles in it. If you were on bottom that had vegetation, you would have bits and pieces of vegetation on it. And because when I first started fishing, we had no Loran, we had no radar, we had no GPS, we had no fish finder. We barely had a VHF radio. And so you had to learn the bottom. And if you learned the bottom, you knew where you were, you could go there and you could be successful. So he said to me, if you want to be successful, you need to know what the bottom looks like out there. So I did it for 2 years in my small boat, or 3 years in my small boat, and I caught fish. Ground fishing was a little easier then. There was lots of cod and haddock around. I was what they call a long liner, which is a hook every 6 feet on a short leader with a piece of bait. And you would put out 300 hooks to a bundle, and you'd take 10 bundles with you. So that's 3,000 hooks. And you would anchor both ends and have a line run it to the surface with a ball. And you would lay it out on the ocean floor, down tide, and you wait for the tide to turn, and then you would haul it back up. I had an electric hauler, hydraulic, of course, as we went after that. And you would gaff the fish, and you could make a real good living. Prices were good, fuel prices were good, nothing was expensive, and there was plenty of fish around because technology still hadn't come yet. We had like a color machine or a graph, a paper graph. We would have an older Iran where you had to dial it in, but then they came out with a new, more computerized one that did it for you. And you would start to learn where you were going. You keep a log, where you were going, what you were doing, how you were doing it, what time of the year, when you made the set. I can still remember sets from 1990 in March or April or February, fishing down 40 miles down on along the fishing rip, and a 24-foot boat with a 200-horse Johnson on it. I'm surprised I'm not gone 20 times already, but I guess the man upstairs kept an eye on me and kept me around because he didn't want to listen to me. So once I started doing that long lining, it became profitable, and we were catching fish. So I moved to Howich, from Orleans to Howich 3 years ago. But I was at the pier. I think there's only 2 or 3 guys who've been at the pier longer than me, people who've owned their own business and their own boat. Some of the younger guys bought boats that learned to fish there with their fathers and relatives and friends. But there's only maybe 2 or 3 guys left my age, older than me, a couple my age, but there isn't many people left there that, everybody's moved on. And, when I came here, I was 32 and I'm 67. So I've been there for 35 years. And what was nice about fishing here was the camaraderie between the guys. Most guys were okay. Some guys, they didn't like newcomers. They didn't like me because I caught fish. And, I told them, I grew up in Provincetown. I learned from them guys, and so once you know the basics of any business of fishing, it doesn't take much to figure it out. And by learning from what Tiggy had showed me, I learned the bottom, and learning the bottom was everything. Codfish especially would go to certain bottom that they liked, we called them gardens, where they had rocks and they had these little plants that grew in the bottom called lemons, and they would have a long stem and like a lemon at the end. I don't really know what they were. I know they were attached to the rocks, and every time you found the lemons, you found fish. So it was or a mussel bed where we learned how to find the mussels. And in the summertime, the fish would move offshore a little bit on these mussel beds, and you could still catch fish. And then you get a little bit of the gray mud bottom off to the side, and you could catch haddock, because haddock were not really a bait eater. They're a bottom sucker, and their favorite food is brittle stars, which are the little stars, the very skinny ones that move around a lot. You can crunch them in your hand, and just like sand, they fall apart. And that was their favorite food, because they had a mouth on the bottom, more like a sucker in a river. They would just walk along and suck it in and blow it out, and suck it in and blow it out. And, and that's how they fed. Codfish were a bait chaser. They liked herring. They liked mackerel. They liked anything that swam. And their mouth was a little more up forward, and like a striped bass where it's more up forward, a bait chaser. But they also learned to grub too. And they would eat little crabs, and they would eat anything that was on the bottom. Little bugs. We used to find these little bugs. We didn't know what they were. They ate them. We imitated them. We caught fish. I never got into gill netting. I just wasn't a fan of it. And so I just stayed with the hook fishing. And around 1990, I bought my first real, semi-real fishing boat called the Black Boat, made by Johnny Stello in Chatham. And I moved the boat to the pier, and people kind of started to accept me a little bit. And I started watching them and, learning. And of course, electronics became better and quicker and faster. And because I learned how to navigate with a watch and a compass. It's the only way I learned how to navigate was with a watch and a compass. And so, my the old stuff stayed right here in the head, adding the new stuff on top on this side. And so I learned old, intermediate, and we haven't gone to the future part yet. And so I started to become pretty good at what I did, made some money, and we used to bait our own gear. My family baited gear. My wife baited gear. My kids baited gear. And I all got paid. And we would start fishing and catching a lot of fish. But so didn't everybody else. We weren't alone. The problem is we started to lose the environment, started to change a little bit. The water got a little warmer. The bait fish didn't stay around as much. And things started to move to the north a little bit. We started seeing some southern stuff show up offshore, stuff that we normally never caught. And as it got going along pretty good, with the Black Boat, we used to catch tuna, and the price of tuna was up $15, $20. And people still remember those days, but those days are long gone. And because a gentleman named, I might have the last name off a little, Frank Sagnatowski or Sabakowski or had brought the Moonies here to Gloucester. And if you remember, we just got done with World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So nobody wanted to work with the Asians. And once they started to come here and started forking out lots of money, everybody became an instant tuna fisherman. Oh, I go tuna fishing. All guys I knew who didn't know what end of a rod to hold were now big time commercial fishermen. Because like any gold rush, everybody goes for the gold. I got to get me my fair share. It's my God-given right. I keep telling everybody that must have been the third tablet Moses dropped on the way down the mountain. But it became very lucrative, the business. And people started fishing a lot. And by 96, I bought another boat called the Magic, 96, and it was a BHM, Blue Hill Marine, made in Maine, 31 footer, great little boat, made a ton of money. And again, with the long lining and the tuna and the bass. And then I started testing the charters a little bit because for some reason, I just looked, my grandfather taught me, never look at the end of the hood when you drive down the road, look a mile down the road. And I saw something coming that I didn't like. I didn't see the herring anymore on the surface. I didn't see the big fish around as much as they used to be. The environment was changing and the fish were moving north. But what I did notice was the fishermen started getting bigger boats, more gear, more power, more electronics, more technology. And of course, the fish, they just fish. And like I would tell everybody, I throw a couple back because without the fish, there is no me. And people didn't listen. And big boats started showing up here and catching up everything. And the government, we put up a picket fence out there, the 200-mile limit. But if you got in with the politicians, you could get in here and you could catch certain species. And, and it became political, which was the wrong thing to do. But I had no choice. I used to go to meetings, get upset, speak the truth. And they all knew it. And they would let me say my piece. Did they listen? Yeah. Did they ever do anything I said? Probably not. But they listened because it's my business. And then they started making us call in. We'd have to stand at the dock, call this phone number. I asked the lady where she was. She told me Salt Lake City. Why would somebody in Salt Lake City care what we do in New England? But whatever. We had to do it, and they gave us this big, long number that would allow us to go fishing. And then when we came in, we had to get back on the phone and log out. And we had to get a big, long number. So now I have to ask permission every day to go to work from people I don't know, and from a government that should have not got the politics involved in what they did, but they did, and there was nothing I could do about it. Hook Association, we started in 91, and I was one of the first to put a check up there and said, we need to get involved with this. And they worked very hard. A lot of people came, a lot of people went. There's a handful of us left of the originals. But these guys work hard, and they pushed and pushed and pushed. And sometimes it took 10, 15, 20 years of pushing. I had to go to Washington. I had to go speak to congressmen and senators, and it got to be quite heavy. But you know what? When you're involved with politics, do people listen? I don't know. I'm assuming they listened. And and these guys that was at the time the Fisherman's Hook Association, and I had said it always should have just been the Fishermen's Association, period. Everybody involved, but at the time, hooking was a big thing. There was a lot of us, and that's how it ended up. But now it ended up being the Fishermen's Alliance, which I think is a better deal. They still work hard. They still fight hard. A lot of it is the hands are tied. I go to meetings, I get up and I go, you all know who I am. I don't even have to introduce myself. And I said, why is this taking so long? Why are these regulations so hard for you to pass? I know they're trying to keep people working, people fishing. We all understand that. But, sometimes when things are going in the toilet really quick, you got to make some cuts. And if you don't, not one person fails, everybody fails, because all the businesses take each other down. So what you have left now are the guys who were extremely super good fishermen, who saved their money when things were good, and who invested and got into multiple fisheries. And that way they were able to keep going. And some of them are retiring now. They're my age or better, and are gone. And there's a few under me, not too many people my age now. But most of the fleet is over 50 years old. We have a handful of young guns, but they're working on catching dogfish, and they're working on catching skates. And I'm one of the original guys who started the dogfish, and we got markets for them and everything. Then the government kept open and closing, and we ended up losing a lot of it. And so it was easy fishery. You catch them, you throw them in the boat, you come in, you take them out, you don't clean them, you don't ice them. It was a 2-hour fishery, and you made a good pay. But that only lasts so long. So I got into the charter business, started testing it, and then got better. And as I learned to relax a little bit with my customers, I would take them fishing. And you see a fish here. I told these 3 guys who actually called me yesterday, the guy in the middle with the fancy shirt there with the flowers on it, Rob, called me and said, we're coming back. Give me a couple of dates. So these are like my clients. I'm almost like friends now. I see them in places in Florida, or go out to New York hunting or something. I see them. I told these guys, forget striped bass today. You're going to catch the tuna. And that fish right there weighed 1,050 pounds. It took all 3 of them 3 times at the rod each, 10, 15, 20, about an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes. We got them up to the boat, and we thought it was a submarine. It was so big. And I threw the harpoon, and I hit him in the gill plate, and it bounced off and punched me in the mouth. And the blood was gushing out of my face. And the guys are going, you're bleeding. And I just looked at him and used that old Jesse Ventura. I ain't got time to bleed. I got time to get this fish, because these guys work hard. So I got into the charter business, and because I'm a little well known and I got a big mouth and I told great stories. Dave Ryder, who was probably one of the premier guys here on the Cape when I got here, was already old. Well, he said to me, you should get in the charter business, because he was getting out. I think he was 80 when he got out, lived to be 100. So he said, you need to take over the business, because nobody else here wants to do it. And he said, and I'll tell you why. He says, you tell great stories, you got a big mouth, but you catch fish. And that's what people want to hear. It's not all fishing, it's the stories and all the stuff that go along with it. So I said, well, I really don't want to do that. I would rather stay commercial fishing, but I saw the writing on the wall and it was going downhill. So about 2005, 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there, it really started to drop. So I picked up the charter boat business. I went from 95% commercial to 5% charter, and it went just like this. I was very fortunate and very lucky that it did. Chatham is a very unique place, especially this fish pier. We have the seals, now the great whites. We have the whales outside. The fishing is phenomenal. It's close. It's easy. The profit margin is higher than if you came from over towards Bass River or Hyannis, where the fuel expending, you spend more money in fuel and stuff. And the people here are a little more, have a little more money. I'm not saying the other towns don't. It's just a little more prevalent here. And I built up a clientele base of about 2,000, 3,000 people. And I only have 120 spots. And I couldn't do it, and I can't do it. These guys you see here on this picture are guys that work for the Division Marine Fisheries. And I took them all fishing. And I said, forget striped bass. We're going to go catch something different. So we went out and we caught sea bass and fluke. And as you see, there's a pile on the floor. These guys were ecstatic. So this has become the new in fishery right now. But you have to remember, a lot of people along the way taught me what I know. And if you keep it all here and you keep it all in your mind, but probably the biggest reason I did okay is this is not a business to me. This is my love. And if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would still go fishing and I would take my people fishing because they look forward to the good stories and they look forward to the camaraderie and they look forward to going on a nice boat. My boat is top of the line. And, you know, they appreciate all the hard work you do and they take care of me and, you know, the money flows. I make sure I get them fishing. I don't care if I have to do 3 charters a day. Sometimes I'm kind of getting a little old for that now, but these people have been now my bread and butter and they like to hear the old stories, you know, about fishing and stuff. But I have to remember all the older generation that nobody talks about anymore. Because most of the guys really don't know. I'm the grandson of this generation. My brother, who is 3 years younger than me, doesn't know any of these people. Never got into the fishery, never did this, never. He got a home in Falmouth, but he was a lawyer and he was doing his thing in Worcester. But what happens is that you learn from these older people. I try to pass it on. I got the young guns now come down and they go, hey, old timer, tell us about this, tell us about that. And, you know, that's my grandson right there with his first fish, 700 pounds last summer. And, you know, I'm teaching them, but they're going to go to school because that's what my grandfather wanted me to go to school. And he would, in Arabic, some light swearing words, and you're not going to be a fisherman because Manny told him this boy should be a fisherman because he's good at it and he wants to learn. And, you know, in them days, it was fun. So we have all the older guys now, which are on there, you know, most of them are gone. Had some great fishermen in this town. Jack Hour, even though he was grumpy, taught me a lot. Even he'd say, boy, come over here. And, you know, I was young, I didn't know, and I let him, you know, beat me up a little bit, as to say, I know how to butter the bread. And there were things he taught me, you know, Dave Wright, another guy, things, you know, they don't have to take you by the hand, but they talk. Tiggy Peluso, another one. Freddie Bennett, another one. You know, I see Freddie fishing there and I'm like, and then Freddie comes in and he's got 5,000 pounds. I remember where Freddie was fishing. He might not be there the next day. I go there. I catch. You learn from watching these people. And it is, you know, but there's nobody to take my place. My sons don't want to do it. They're all educated. And I got this youngster here, youngest grandson. I have another one older who just won the robotics championship twice in this country. And hopefully he'll go to MIT. And his father, of course, doesn't care for that. But hey, we'll get him through. We'll pay. We'll figure it out, but we'll get him through. Because there's nothing left. There's some sport fishing. The lobster guys have been doing good because they really, really, really stay on it. A lot of regulations. The scallop guys too, lots of regulations. And they do their thing. The amounts are small, but the price is high. So they're doing fine. And but the ground fishery is pretty much done, except for some skates and some dogfish and stuff and some monks. But the cod, that used to be the big thing here. Cod was the big thing. Pretty much gone the way of the fishing. Of course, the technology now is phenomenal. Anybody who buys a GPS can now be, as I call them, a superhero. They come right out there. They know right where you are. They see you on the radar. They know the fishing, and they catch fish. And these small fisheries like tuna get caught up very fast. And when you put a lot of fish on the market, there's a glut, the price drops. So you're killing fish for free. And I'm not a fan of that, but I'm only one person. And like they say, old timer, go retire. So I want to thank you for listening to my 10-second story. That's me right there with a tuna fish, fishing by myself off of Chatham. It's not that hard to do. You can do it. It's in a little, you got to learn a little bit, but that's the new boat. And that's the boat I take all the people fishing on. And so it's been quite the thing. I don't know if the lady in the back has more pictures of other fish. But if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And like I tell my sons, there's only family, then you'll have grandkids, wife, life, and death. And on that sour note, I'll end my conversation.
And Mike, thank you very much. That's great. Quick question. So what was your most memorable, this is Kevin, sorry, I can't get my screen to show up.
Right.
What's your most memorable day out in the charter?
Out on a charter?
Yeah.
It was probably about 2 years ago. First thing the people saw was the seals at the dock, which to them was the greatest thing since holes in Swiss cheese. Then as we went out to cut, there was a great white. And he was sitting there in the water. He wasn't doing anything. And we pulled up and took some pictures of it. And then as we were heading to Monomoy, there was a big humpback whale. So we kind of swung over to it a little bit, came up a couple of times, and people got to see it. We followed it around a little bit. It was kind of cool, but I didn't want to push the issue too much. So then we went down and we went fishing, and we caught some fish. And a great white came up and bit one of the fish, leaped up in the air behind the boat, scared everybody. And then the second time he came up, smashed on the half of a striped bass that was left. We got it on film, so it was pretty cool. And then when we came back in, there was a boat pointing in the water, and there was a dead seal, blood everywhere, a little gory, with a seal and a great white chewing on him. And then we come back to the dock, and the people looked at me and said, "We have never seen this. That was the greatest 4-hour fishing trip I ever saw, ever had, and will ever see." And of course, that was kind of a rare to have all that at one day. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for all of these stories. It's clearly been a very eventful career for you as a fisherman. And I'll again remind everyone that you can type in your questions and then I can pose them to Mike. And we've already got one question actually, which is about how the waters sort of warming up around the Cape has affected fishing, like whether that's affected the numbers that you see or any of your sort of behaviors in going certain areas.
Right. Well, the environment has had a very, very big change in the water temperature, had a very big change in the weather patterns too. And the fish of the old days were fish that have been there for centuries. And they would come to the same spots, spawn, move to another spot, go. Now, when they started getting ready to, they got out of here to move, they would go back to the same spots. The water might have been a little too warm for them. The feed wouldn't be there, the food. So they would go north back into the little more temperate, cooler water, more feed, and then they would just follow that. They learn to move and follow it. The great schools of herring we used to see miles and miles of are gone. We have a lot of mackerel around, but the big boats have been targeting them like they did the herring, and they took a lot of the food away. But the temperature has warmed up. The codfish moved. They went north. Iceland, Norway are having the greatest year they've ever had. Well, we're not having anything. This was more or less the southern range of the cod fishing, but the cod fishing was phenomenal. Great big fish, 50, 100-pound fish were common all the time. But you've had a lot of the southern fish now moving up. I mean, we got manatees here. You know, a couple of years, 4 or 5 years back, we had a manatee show up a couple of times. They catch a tarpon once in a while, or a strange fish from down south that out in Nantucket Sound where the water is 72, 73, 74 degrees, which is Florida water. If you go offshore 80 miles and you get out in the real, the Gulf Stream, you catch everything out there, manta rays, turtles, marlin, mahi, dolphin, wahoo. Those are all more southern style fish, but now they're up here further offshore. Yellowfin, big-eye tuna. The bluefins only come here because the water is cooler. The yellowfin don't, but the environment has changed a lot. So it's changed a lot of the way the fish think. And they say, well, we're not going to stick around here anymore. We're going to go north. The water's cooler. The food is plentiful. The bait is plentiful. The spawning is, we can do it up there. So they don't come back. They don't come back. A lot of the stuff we caught here was resident fish that have lived here all their lives, might have moved 50 miles east, 50 miles south, 50 miles west, 50 miles north. But they more or less stayed, and I did a tagging program with the Hook Association. I tagged 2,700 cod. I don't know, they got back 600, 700, 800 tags. Most of the fish were from here to Maine, a couple of Georgias, and a few down towards Nantucket, but they mostly stayed in this area. So environment has played probably 30, 40% factor on availability of fish, because like I said, they've moved and they won't be coming back.
Well, thank you for that. It's interesting hearing this sort of almost quantitative ways that we can see how these various environmental things impact that sort of day-to-day wildlife. I've got another question about, you had mentioned that you started out doing 95% commercial fishing and then 5% doing the charters, and then
Right.
that kind of swapped.
When I first started, yes.
Yeah, are you still doing some commercial fishing at some
I
point?
still commercially fish, yes. I catch striped bass, blues, fluke, sea bass, tuna. I don't have a cod license anymore. I take a lot of my people to do these fisheries too. If we have a couple of extra fish left over and they don't want them, I'll sell them. Got to put a little fish on the license. But for me, and even with the tuna, anything over 73 inches really belongs to the boat. And most of the fish, what are you going to do with a 500? What's a person going to do with a 500-pound fish? So what happens is that I sell the fish, and next time they come, I take the deposit and I keep it. You know, I don't charge them a deposit. I charge them less money, and you know, they some people go, well, maybe I should sell the whole fish. I go, do you have a license? And they say no, and I said, well, I guess you won't be selling the fish. So, but it's I still commercially fish. I still like to commercially fish. It's kind of by September, I'm burned out because I do 120 charters in 3 months. So, and a lot of them are all-day charters. And it's fun, especially when you got good guys. You don't have to hold their hand, and they know what they're doing, good people. I get a lot of ladies come fishing, and I got to tell you, when they get off their boat, the husbands look at me and go, you created a monster. Because a lot of women, oh, I don't know if I can reel it in. Oh, I don't know if I have the strength. And when I teach them the right way to do it, They're cranking in fish left and right, and they're saying to the husband, have a beer and a sandwich. I'll reel this one in. So it kind of makes me feel good, because when you butter up Ma, you can say, hey, we're going fishing. And she'll be going, I'll be right there. So there's never any issue. So that's kind of funny. I do have some ladies who are really good, though. I had a couple of the girls from the Hook Association catch 300-pound tuna. The very first fish the girl caught was 300 pounds. She goes, I never caught a fish in my life, not even a pickerel. And I went, well, I guess you just did. And, and my buyer's secretary, she caught one 250 pounds. My grandson, he's a skinny little stick, 14 years old, and he caught a 300-pounder last year. Not hard when you learn correctly. It's not all bull work. And these people come fishing with me, and, they take care of them, and they take care of you.
Great. We've got another question. Somebody has their hand raised in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind typing out your question, then I can pose it to Mike as well. So the question that I have right now is, how has the bottom changed? You mentioned that sort of test that you can do to figure out if there's mussels or rocks or whatever. Have you noticed that has changed, or has that?
Actually, it changed a while back, because the scallopers and the draggers, because they needed to catch more fish, put on bigger gear, heavier doors, and they would crush the bottom. They would crush the little gardens. They would crush the mussels. They would crush the different little sea amenities in different places and stuff. And then the scallopers would go in there with their 4,000-pound dredges, raking up scallops, and they got into some of it too and crushed it up. But since the ground fishery has slowed down an awful lot, you don't see them guys anymore. The little gardens look like they're starting to come back a little bit. The little mussel beds are starting to grow a little bit. See, everything just keeps moving, and nothing in the ocean stops. It's a 24-hour-a-day cycle, and nothing ever stops. Fish eat at night. Fish eat during the day. Fish eat whenever they can. Sometimes they eat at midnight, sometimes because they're following a tide. But the bottom was kind of, I would say, smushed a little bit. But since there hasn't been as much ground fishing, I start to see some more lemons. I caught a couple last year. We were jigging for cod, and the guy goes, what is this? I go, oh, it's a lemon. I'm like, oh my God, a lemon. I was like hugging it, and then I threw it back in the water, because it means the bottom is live. The bottom is good. It's clean. It's got animal growth. It's got plants, or maybe a little coral, barnacles. It's a reef, more or less, but it's much smaller, of course. So it's, you look at it and say, oh, things will grow back if you let them. Time is it?
Wonderful.
Getting time for dinner,
I know. We've got someone with their hand raised. So Joanne, I'm gonna see if I'm gonna allow you to talk and see if you can pose your question that way. Let me know if this works for you.
There you go. I have to turn that up.
I just want to thank Mike. I've learned more about fishing than I have my whole life, and what an amazing life, an amazing career. And I would, if I ever wanted to go on a fishing trip, I want to go on your charter, or any of my family. Thank you so much. It was just educational and delightful.
Well, you couldn't have been around too long, because you sound like you're only about 18 or 20. So that's one thing. So you can't tell, you can't fool me. But I'm very happy to have this discussion, only because actually it's not even really about me. It's more about the old people, timers who are gone, who are forgotten. And, people write books and stuff like that. But when you lived it, do you remember, and I'm sure you're old enough to remember this, you remember when Ali, went through what he went through, not wanting to go to Vietnam, not in the war or anything like that? Well, we lived that time. Granted, you can watch this on video, but it's not the same. And I try to tell people, when they read a book, you're getting the finer pieces of it. And then but you're not living it. You don't see it. You don't feel it. You don't taste it. You don't smell it. The Portuguese people taught me you don't need any electronics. The nose catches more fish than anything because fish have an odor and bait has an odor and you can smell it. And I try to tell people, and they're all like looking at me going, are you out of your mind? And then all of a sudden you get a whiff and I go smell it and they go, oh my God, I can smell it. When you're looking for it. But it's more about the old timers and what they did and how these people nowadays think they created the fishery. Fisheries were created thousands of years ago. And I didn't know this until I read National Geographic, and I say that with a little humor, is that back in 900 AD, and I didn't know this, the Arabs, I'm Lebanese, so I'm in there, used to learned how to catch bluefin tuna in the Mediterranean. And they taught the Italians how to do it. And I was like, really? I never knew that. I always thought the Italians were the one that invented it. It was the Arabs and the Greeks, and because they used to put up these nets and they would catch these things. And I never knew that. I was like, wow, one of the few things National Geographic has taught me. But I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And hopefully it's a little educational and no brag on my part, believe me. Not all of it was perfect, but we never talked about that part.
Well, I think what we like the most, Mike, is your passion, and we're very grateful that you took the time to talk to us today, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We all enjoyed it. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We're glad you were able to join our lecture, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one on June 15th. Thank you and have a great evening.